The average auto repair shop in America pulls in around $1.2 million a year in revenue. Sounds like a great business. But the average net profit margin across the industry is only about 6%, while well-run shops routinely clear 15 to 25%, sometimes more, on that exact same kind of revenue. Before you open an auto garage, here's what nobody tells you. That gap, 6% versus 20% on the same million-dollar business, isn't about location or luck. It comes down to one specific number almost no first-time owner tracks closely enough. The difference between what a job actually costs your shop to perform and what your labor rate says it should be worth. Get that number right, and this is one of the more resilient small businesses you can own. Get it wrong, and you can be busy every single day and still barely survive. By the time this is over, you're going to understand exactly why. Before we talk about money, we need to talk about what an auto garage actually is. Because almost everyone underestimates how much of this business is really about two very different revenue streams stitched together. When you open a garage, you are running a labor business and a parts business at the same time, and they behave completely differently. Labor typically carries gross margins of 50 to 65%, genuinely excellent economics. Because once you've paid your technician, almost everything above that cost flows straight to the shop. Parts typically carry gross margins closer to 20 to 30%, meaningfully thinner, because you're marking up something you had to buy from a supplier in the first place. And that markup has to cover sourcing, inventory, warranty exposure, and handling on top of simple profit. The service mix you build your shop around, more diagnostic and labor-heavy work versus more tire and parts-heavy work, quietly determines your entire margin profile before you've priced a single job. Here is where the range depends heavily on how many bays you're building and how much diagnostic equipment you need from day one. Startup costs for an auto repair shop typically range from $50,000 to $500,000, and that enormous spread comes down to a few specific line items: your physical location, your initial equipment and inventory, licensing and permits, and your first months of payroll and marketing before a steady customer base develops. A lean, single-bay independent operation sits at the low end of that range, focused on essential diagnostic tools and a narrower service menu. A full multi-bay shop, capable of servicing 400 or more vehicles a month, requires meaningfully more capital in lifts, diagnostic equipment, and technician payroll, but also unlocks the volume that drives revenue toward that million-dollar-plus range top shops actually hit. Here's the part that catches almost every first-time owner off guard. Most auto repair shops take several years to reach the point where cumulative net profit actually exceeds what it cost to open the doors. This isn't a business where a strong first year means you're in the clear. It's one where the equipment and location investment genuinely needs time to pay itself back. So you've got your bays built, your lifts installed, and technically you're now running a garage. Congratulations! Before your first car rolls in, you have a set of problems that a normal retail business simply doesn't have. The first problem is that your effective labor rate and your posted labor rate are often two completely different numbers. A shop might post a labor rate of $140 an hour, but between diagnostic time that doesn't get billed, comebacks, and technician efficiency that never quite hits 100% of the clock, the rate you're actually collecting per hour worked can be meaningfully lower, and most owners never calculate that gap until their margins already don't make sense. The second problem is parts margin leakage, and it happens quietly. Discounts given to keep a customer happy, inconsistent markup between technicians quoting jobs, and simple pricing guesswork instead of a real disciplined markup structure can bleed real profit out of the parts side of the business without ever showing up as an obvious mistake on any single invoice. The third problem is technician availability, and it's a genuine structural headwind. The industry is projected to have tens of thousands of open technician positions every year for the foreseeable future, which means a shop's growth ceiling is often capped by how many skilled technicians it can actually find and retain, not by how many customers want an appointment. The fourth problem is that break-even in this business is a real, specific number of repair orders a month, not a vague target. A shop with meaningful fixed costs might genuinely need well over 100 completed repair orders a month just to cover overhead before a single dollar becomes profit, and every job below that threshold is effectively the shop paying to stay open. Let's say you've solved the big problems: bays built, technicians hired, equipment calibrated. Now let's talk about what it costs every month, regardless of how many cars come through the door. Fixed costs, rent, insurance, equipment financing, and base technician wages have to be covered before variable costs, like parts and consumables, even enter the picture. Using a real shop's numbers as an example, a shop carrying $35,000 a month in fixed costs at a 60% contribution margin per job needs to generate roughly $58,000 in monthly revenue just to break even, which, at a typical repair order value, works out to somewhere around 30 jobs a week before the shop earns a single dollar of profit. And this is the part that quietly separates thriving garages from struggling ones. Because gross margins on labor are so much stronger than gross margins on parts, two shops doing the exact same total revenue can have wildly different actual profitability depending on whether their work skews toward diagnostic and labor-heavy jobs or toward high-volume, parts-heavy services like tires and oil changes. Here is where the auto garage business gets genuinely interesting, because the 6% industry average and the 20% well-run shop number aren't really describing different luck. They're describing a 14-point gap almost entirely explained by operational discipline most owners never build. Consider a single $80 oil change costing a shop $56 in labor and parts. That's a 30% margin on paper. Scale that same discipline, or lack of it, across every job type a shop performs in a month: diagnostics, brake jobs, engine work, and the cumulative gap between a shop that tracks its effective labor rate and parts markup rigorously versus one that prices by feel and gut instinct compounds into precisely the difference between a 6% and a 20% net margin on the exact same $1 million of revenue. Here's the number that changes everything. On that same $1.2 million average shop revenue, the difference between the industry average margin and a well-run shop's margin works out to roughly $165,000 a year. $165,000, sitting entirely in the gap between posted labor rates and effective labor rates, and between a real parts markup strategy and pricing guesswork. The shop isn't more profitable because it's busier. It's more profitable because it actually knows, job by job, what every hour of labor and every part sold is truly worth after the real costs are counted. There are really two types of people who end up running auto garages, and their businesses look almost nothing alike on paper despite doing very similar work. The first is the volume and feel operator, someone who prices jobs based on what feels competitive, matches nearby shops on labor rate without calculating their own actual costs, and focuses primarily on keeping bays full. This owner can genuinely stay busy every single day and still land close to that 6% industry average margin, because busy and profitable are not the same thing in this business. The second is the margin-disciplined operator, someone who tracks effective labor rate by job type, runs a real parts markup matrix instead of guessing, and treats invoice reconciliation as a core weekly habit rather than an afterthought. This owner's shop might look identical from the parking lot, same bays, same lifts, same customers walking in, but consistently lands in that 15 to 25% range on the same revenue the volume and feel operator is struggling to turn into real profit. Let's run the numbers on a 4-bay independent garage opened for $200,000. With the optimistic scenario, the shop builds a disciplined pricing structure from day one, tracking effective labor rate by job type and running a consistent parts markup matrix. Annual revenue reaches $1.2 million within 3 years, in line with the industry average. But because pricing discipline is built in from the start, net margin lands at 18%, netting around $216,000 a year. The $200,000 startup investment pays back within the first year of reaching that revenue level. Talking about the realistic scenario, the shop reaches that same $1.2 million revenue mark, genuinely busy, technicians booked out, bays full most days, but labor rates were set by matching nearby competitors, rather than calculating true effective cost, and parts pricing varies job to job based on whichever technician quoted it. Net margin lands at the industry average 6%, netting around $72,000 a year, less than the owner would earn as a salaried technician somewhere else, despite running the entire business. The payback period on that same $200,000 investment stretches from roughly a year to nearly 3. The difference between those two outcomes isn't how many cars came through the door. It's whether every single one of them was priced with real discipline behind it. Owning an auto garage is not simply a matter of being good with cars and keeping the bays full. It's a business where two shops can look identical from the parking lot. Same revenue, same customer count, same technicians, and still land 14 percentage points apart in actual profitability. Purely based on pricing discipline, neither customer nor competitor would ever notice from the outside. The $50,000 lean single-bay shop and the $500,000 full multi-bay operation are the same business wearing different clothes. A bet that you can turn busy bays into real profit before industry average pricing habits quietly cap your margin at a fraction of what the exact same shop is capable of earning. For the owner who treats effective labor rate and parts margin discipline as a weekly habit, not an afterthought, an auto garage can be one of the more durable, genuinely profitable small businesses in this entire series. For the owner who prices by feel and assumes busy means profitable, it's an expensive way to discover that a full parking lot and a thriving business were never actually the same thing.